Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, April 8th. I hope you guys are having a good day. And I've got our messages for today. Hope you had a good day yesterday. And here's the things we'll be working on today, hopefully. A couple reminders. Keep in mind those changes in learning opportunities. We're really focusing a lot more on the IXL side of things. So keep working on IXL, math, and reading. Some of you are doing a great job. Some of you could maybe do a little bit more, but make sure you're taking a look at the IXL standards. They're in the both have posts in either reading or math to tell you which ones to really focus on. Message me if you need any help or if you want anything reviewed. Lunches and breakfasts are served up at the high school, so take advantage of those. Wednesday is usually a hot lunch day, so I think you'll get a hot lunch today if you go up there. Message me if you have any questions at all. I love hearing from you guys, so let me know. And stay safe and stay home. As for academics today, make sure you guys are continuing on Prodigy. Some of you are doing a great job on that, but keep taking a look on Prodigy. Try to work 15, 20 minutes on that a day. IXL, I posted which standards I want you to focus on. And Kahoot, I did post one earlier this week. And so if you haven't done the Dirty 30 Kahoot, take a look at that. AR, make sure you're reading every day. Keep taking those tests. And you also have those standards that Miss Sommerfeld posted for you to work on for IXL. Social studies, I posted a video last week. The soccer is still up, and I posted a Kahoot on state symbols earlier this week. So if you haven't done that, feel free to do that. And the link for Mr. Buckley's FIAD video is in Class Dojo under Specialists, so you can take a look at that as well. Continuing on with the City of Ember, we finished the first 2 chapters. We learned a lot about Lena, and today we're going to learn a little bit more about Dune here. So looking forward to that. Reminder, here's that city, and you can come back to it as well, just like we did yesterday. We've got this river. This is going to come into play today, this subterranean river, which is right here. So that's important. Here's Lena's house. Here's Doom's house. And yesterday we also talked about the clock tower in Harkin Square here, which is part of the gathering hall. So that's all right here in the center of the city. Makes sense. Clock tower is usually in the center. So you can take a look at those, and we'll continue reading with our new stuff today. Chapter 3, Under Ember. And this is kind of weird because we're this first day of Lena's day. We're actually going to go back and we're going to learn about Dune's first day. So it's going to start off with that morning. So it's the morning of Lena's first day and the morning of Dune's first day. So it's a separate chapter, separate thing, but these were all happening at the same time, essentially. That morning, Dune had arrived at the pipeworks full of anticipation. The world of serious work at last, where he would get a chance to do something useful. What he'd learned in school and from his father and from his own investigations, he could put it all together, put it all to good purpose now. He pushed open the heavy pipeworks door and stepped inside. The air smelled strongly of dampness and moldy rubber, which seemed to him a pleasant, interesting smell. He strode up the hallway to where the yellow stickers hung from pegs on the walls, and at the end of the hallway was a room full of people, some of them sitting on benches and pulling their knee-high rubber boots, some struggling into their slickers, some buckling on tool belts. A raucous clamor filled the room. Dune watched from the doorway, eager to join in, but not sure what to do. After a moment, a man emerged from the throng. He thrust out a hand. "Lister Monk, Pipeworks Director," he said. "You're the new boy, right? What size feet do you have? Large, medium, or small?" "Medium," said Dune, and Lister found him a slicker and a pair of boots. The boots were so ancient that their green rubber was cracked all over, as if it was covered with spider webs. He gave Dune a tool belt, too, in which were wrenches and hammers, spools of wire and tape, and tubes of all sort of black goop. "You'll be at Tunnel 97 today," Lister said. "Arlen Frall will go down with you to show you what to do." He pointed at a short, delicate-looking woman with white blonde braid down her back. She may not look like an expert, but she is. Dune buckled his tool belt around his waist and put on his slicker, which, for some reason, smelled like sweaty feet. This way, said Arlen, without saying hello or smiling. She drove through this crowd of workers and into the door marked Stairway and opened it. Stone steps led so far down that Dune couldn't see either end of them. On either side was a sheer wall of dark reddish stone, glistening with dampness. There was no railing. Along the ceiling ran a single wire from which a light bulb hung every few yards. Water stood in the shallow pools on each stair, and in the hollow worn into the stones of years of footsteps. They started down. Dune concentrated on his feet. The clumsy boots made it hard not to stumble. As they went deeper, he began to hear a low roar. So low he seemed to hear it more with his stomach than his ears. It grew louder and louder. Was it a machine of some kind? Maybe the generator. The stairway came to the end of a door marked Main Tunnel. Arlen opened it, and as they stepped through, Dune realized that the sound he'd been hearing wasn't a machine. It was the river. He stood still, staring. Like most people, he had never really sure what a river was, just that it was water, and that somehow it flowed on its own. He imagined it would be clear, narrow stream that came out of a kitchen faucet, only bigger, and horizontal instead of vertical. But this was something entirely different. Not a stream of water, but endless tons of it pouring by. Wide as the widest street in Ember, churning and dipping and swirling, the river roared past its turbulent surface like a black liquid glass scattered with flecks of light. Dune had never seen anything that moved so fast, and he had never heard such a thunderous, heart-stopping roar. The path they stood on was about 6 feet wide and ran parallel to the river for farther than Dune could see in both directions. Hopefully you guys are picturing this as we're going through, right? There's this river, they're underneath the ground, and there's this river flowing through, and there's this pathway going all the way along it. In the wall along the path were openings that must lead, Dune thought, to the tunnels that branched out everywhere below the city. A string of lights like one in the stairway hung high up against the arched ceiling. Dune knew he was standing beneath the north edge of Ember. In school, you were taught to remember the directions this way. North was the direction of the river, south was the direction of the greenhouses. East was the direction of the school, and west was the direction of leftover, having nothing in particular to mark it. All of the pipeworks tunnels branched off from the main tunnel to the south toward the city. Arlen leaned towards Dune and shouted in his ear. "First we'll go to the beginning of the river," she said. She led him up the main tunnel for a long way. They passed other people in yellow slickers, who greeted Arlen a nod and glanced curiously at Dune. After 15 minutes or so, they came to the east edge of the pipeworks, where the river surged up from the deep chasm in the ground, churning in so violently that its dark water turned white and filled with air and spray that wet Dune's face. I'm picturing these slickers as kind of like a yellow raincoat, I think. They keep talking about these yellow slickers. I think it's like a yellow raincoat. In the wall to the right, there was a wide double door. "See that door right there?" Arlen shouted, pointing. "Yes," Dune shouted back. "That's the generator room." "Can we go in?" "Of course not," said Arlen. "You have to have a special permission." She pointed back down to the main tunnel. "Now we'll go to the end of the river," she said. She led him back past the stairway and door all the way to the west edge of the pipeworks, where the river flowed into a huge opening in the wall and vanished into darkness. "Where does it go?" Dune asked. Arlen just shrugged. "Back in the ground, I guess. Now let's find Tunnel 97. We'll get to work." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "This is your map," she said. "You have one in your pocket, too. You have to use the map to find your way around here." The map looked to Dune like an immense centipede. The river arched across the top of the page like a centipede's body, and the tunnels dangled down like hundreds of long, long legs all tangled up for each other. To get to Tunnel 97, they followed a complicated route through passageways lined with crusty, rusted pipes and carried water to all the buildings of Ember. Puddles stood on the floor and of the tunnel, and water dripped in brown rivulets down the walls. Just as the main tunnel, there were a string of bulbs along the ceiling that provided dim light. Dune occupied his mind by calculating how far underground he was. From the river to the ceiling of the main tunnel must be 30 feet or so, he thought. Above were the storerooms, which occupied a layer of at least 20 feet high. So that meant he was 50 feet underground, with tons of earth and rock and buildings above him. The thought made him tense up his shoulders. He cast a quick glance upward, as if all that weight might collapse onto his head. "Here we are," said Arlen. She was standing next to a leak that spurted out of a stream of water straight out from the wall. "We have to turn off the shut-off valve, take the pipe apart, put in a new connector, and stick it back together again." With wrenches, hammers, washers, black goop, they did this, getting soaked in the process. It took them most of the morning and proved to Dune that the city was even worse shape than he had suspected. Not only were the lights about to fail, but the supplies were about to run out. But the water system was breaking down. The whole city was crumbling. And what was anyone doing about it? When lunch break came, Arlen took her lunch sack out of her pocket and in her tool belt and went off to meet some friends a few tunnels away. "You stay right here and wait until I get back," she said as she left. "If you wander around, you'll get lost." But Dune set out as soon as she disappeared. Using his map, he found his way back to the main tunnel, then hurried to the east end. He wasn't going to wait for special permission to see the generator. He was pretty sure that if he could find a way to get in on his own, he did. He simply stood by the door and waited for someone to come out. Quite soon, a stout woman carrying a lunch sack pushed open the door and walked away. She didn't notice him. Before the door could close again, Dune slipped inside. Such a horrendous noise met him that he was staggered backwards a few steps. It was an ear-splitting, growling, grinding, screaming noise, shot through with a hoarse, rackety-rack sound and underscoring with a deep chugga-chugga-chugga. Dune clapped his hands over his ears and stepped forward. In front of him was a gigantic black machine, 2 stories high. It was vibrating so hard it looked as if it might explode any second. Several people wearing earmuffs were busy around it. None of them noticed him come in. He tapped them on the shoulder, and the person jumped and whirled around. He was an old man, Dune saw, and deeply lined brown face. "I want to learn about the generator," Dune screamed, but might as well have saved his breath. No one could be heard in the uproar. The old man glared at him, made a shooing motion with his hand, and turned back to work. Dune stood and watched for a while. Beside the huge machine were ladders on wheels that workers pushed back and forth and climbed up to reach the high parts. All over the room, greasy-looking cans and tools littered the floor. Against the walls stood big bins, holding every kind of bolt and screw and gear and lever and rod and tube, all with the black of age and jumbled together. The workers scurried between the bins and the generator or simply stood and watched the thing shake. After a few minutes, Dune left. He was horrified. All his life, he had studied how things worked. It was one of his favorite things to do. He could take apart an old watch and put it back together exactly as it had been. He understood how the faucets and the sinks worked. He fixed the toilet many times. He made a wheeled cart out of the parts of an old armchair. He even had a hazy idea of what was going on the refrigerator. But he was proud of his mechanical talent. There was only one thing he didn't understand at all, and that was electricity. What was the power that ran through the wires into the light bulbs? Where did it come from? He had thought that if he could just get a look at the generator, he could have a clue he needed. From there, he could begin to work on a solution that would keep the lights of Ember burning. But one glimpse of the generator showed him how foolish he was. He'd expected to see something whose workings he could understand. A wheel turning, a spark being struck, or some wires that led from one point to another. But this monstrous roaring thing, he wondered if anyone understood how it worked. It looked as if they were all it looked as if all they were doing was trying to keep it from flying apart. As it turned out, he was right. When the day was over and he was upstairs taking off his boots and slicker, he saw an old man from the generator room and he went to talk to him. "Can you explain to me about the generator?" he asked. "Can you tell me how it works?" The old man just sighed. "All I know is the river makes it go." "But how?" The man shrugged. "Who knows? Our job is to keep it from breaking down. If a part breaks, we've got to put a new one on. If a part freezes up, we've got to oil it." He wiped his hand wearily across his forehead, leaving a streak of black grease. "I've been working on that generator for 20 years. It's always managed to chug along. But this year, I don't know. The thing seems to break down every couple minutes." He cracked a wry smile. "Of course, I hear we might run out of light bulbs before that, and then it won't matter if the generator's running or not." Running out of light bulbs, running out of power, running out of time. Disaster was right around the corner. That's what Dune was thinking about when he had stopped outside the gathering hall on his way home and saw Lena on the roof. She looked so free and happy up there. He didn't know why she was on the roof, but he wasn't surprised. It was the kind of thing that she did, turning up in unexpected places. And now that she was a messenger, she could go just about anywhere. But how could she be so light-hearted when everything was falling apart? He headed for home. He lived with his father in a 2-bedroom apartment over his father's shop in the Greengate Square. The small item shop, which sold things like nails, pins, tacks, clips, springs, jar lids, doorknobs, bits of wire, shards of glass, chunks of wood, and all other things they might find useful in some way. The small item shop had overflown somewhat to their apartment above. In their front room, where there was other people might display a nice teapot or a tabletop, or a few attractive squashes or tomatoes on a shelf, they had buckets and boxes and baskets full of spare items for the shop. Thing Dune's father had collected, but not yet organized for selling. These items spilled onto the floor. It was easy to trip over things in the apartment, and not a good idea to go barefoot. Today, Dune didn't stop in at the shop to see his father before going upstairs. He wasn't in the mood for conversation. He removed 2 buckets of stuff from the couch and quickly, mostly in it looked mostly like shoe heels, and flopped down on the cushions. He'd been stupid to think that he could understand the generator just by looking at it, when other people had been working on it their entire lives. The thing was, he had to admit, he'd always thought he was smarter than other people. He'd been sure he could learn about electricity and help save the city. He wanted to be the one to do it. He had imagined many times of a ceremony in Harkin Square organized to thank him for saving Ember. With the entire population in attendance and his father beaming from the front row, all Dune's life his father had been saying to him, "You're a good boy and a smart boy. You'll do grand things someday. I know you will." But Dune hadn't done much, and that wasn't what's grand so far. He ached to do something truly important, like finding the secret of electricity, and as his father watched, be rewarded for his achievement. The size of the reward didn't matter. A small certificate would do, or maybe a badge to sew on his jacket. Now he was stuck in the muck and the pipeworks, patching up pipes that would leak and break again in a matter of days. It was even more useless and boring than being a messenger. The thought made him suddenly furious. He sat up, grabbed a shoe heel out of his bucket at his feet, and hurled it with all his might. It arrived at the front door just as the door opened. Dune heard a hard thwack and a loud ouch at the same moment. Then he saw the long, lean, tired face of his father in the doorway. Dune's anger drained away. "Oh, I hit you, Father. I'm sorry." Dune's father rubbed the side of his head. He was a tall man, bald as a peeled potato with a high forehead and a long chin. He had a kind of slightly puzzled gray eyes. Got me in the ear, he said. What was that? I got angry for a second, said Dune. I threw one of these old heels. I see, said his father. He brushed down some bottle tops off a chair and sat down. Does it have to do with your first day at work, son? Yes, said Dune. His father nodded. Why don't you tell me about it? He said. Dune told him. When he finished, his father ran a hand across his bald head as if it were smoothing down hair that wasn't there. He sighed. Well, he said, it sounds unpleasant, I have to admit. About the generator especially, that's bad news. But the pipeworks is your assignment, no way around it. What you get is what you get. What you do with that is what you get, though. That's more the point. Wouldn't you say? He looked at Dune and smiled a bit sadly. I guess so, Dune said. But what can I do? I don't know, said his father. You'll think of something. You're a clever boy. The main thing is that you pay attention. Pay close attention to everything. Notice what no one else notices. Then you'll know what no one else knows. And that's always useful. He took off his coat and hung it from a peg on the wall. How's the worm? He asked. I haven't looked at him yet, said Dune. He went to his room and came out with a small wooden box covered with an old scarf. He set the box down on the table and took the scarf off. He and his father both bent over to look inside. A couple of limp cabbage leaves lay on the bottom of the box. On one of the leaves was a worm about an inch long. A few days before school ended, Dune had found the worm on the underside of a cabbage leaf he was slicing up for dinner. It was pale, soft green, velvety and smooth all over, with tiny stubby legs. Dune had always been fascinated by bugs. He wrote down his observations about them in a book he had titled Crawling and Flying Things. Each page of the book was divided lengthways down the center, and on each page he drew his pictures with a pencil sharpened to a needle-like point, moth wings and their branching patterns of veins, spider legs which had minute hairs and tiny feet and claws, beetles and other with their feelers and their glossy armor. On the right, he wrote what he observed about each creature. He noted what they ate, where they slept, where it laid its eggs, and if he knew, how long it lived. This was difficult with fast-moving creatures like moths and spiders. To learn anything about them, he had to catch them what glimpses he could as they lived in their lives out in the open. If he put them in a box, they scrambled around for a few days and then died. The worm, though, was different. It seemed perfectly happy to live in the box Dune had made for it. So far, it did only 3 things. Eat, sleep. It looked like sleeping, though Dune could never tell if the worm closed its eyes, or even if it had eyes, and expel tiny black poop balls. That was it. I've had it for 5 days now, said Dune. It's twice as big as it was when I got it. It's eaten 2 square inches of cabbage leaf. You're writing all this down? Dune nodded. Maybe, said his father. You'll find some interesting new bugs in the pipeworks. Maybe, said Dune. But to himself he said, no, that's not enough. I can't do plodding around the pipeworks, stopping up leaks, looking for bugs, and pretending there's no emergency. I have to find something important down there, something that's going to help. I have to do it. I just have to. Tomorrow we'll read Chapter 4, Something Lost, Something Found. We'll find out what's lost and found. I hope you guys are really enjoying this story. It's a kind of a mixed up one. We're learning a lot more about Dune and his life, and we've learned quite a bit about Lena, and tomorrow maybe we'll put it together. We'll see. So keep making predictions and thinking about what's up there. I'm joined today by a little Packer guy, and tomorrow we can see which new friend I've got today. So hopefully you guys are having a good time. Keep messaging me and letting me know what's going on. We'll do a Google Hangout on Thursday, 10 o'clock, just as always. And hopefully I see you then. Otherwise, I'll talk to you guys later and have a wonderful day.